mean, you can only push it into the realistic direction so far until before it like reaches a point where it's too realistic. I mean, it loses that heroic kind of silhouette and stance, and so you have to kind of keep it still comic book-like, because otherwise what's the point? I mean, you're completely losing the identity of Iron Man or any other hero if you take it too far with the realism. So it's kind of...
Yeah, at some point it just becomes a deep diving suit or a space suit or something like that, and it's just generic. Anyone could be in it. It's just a piece of technology. At some level you have to actually make it a hero. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we start looking at actual design stuff. You have any thoughts about that in terms of...
I just agree with everything you said. Except that one shouldn't disregard Robert Downey Jr. I mean, having a good actor perform a character is kind of critical. And then having a fabulous suit like that, I'm sure, either made him very happy or very miserable during the shooting, one or the other.
Or the stuntman.
Or the stuntman. But yeah, the very sad stuntman that had to hold their urine for extraordinary lengths of time.
Which is why they get paid the big bucks.
All right, let's take a look at the next picture we've got here. This is again another shot. Well, you guys should introduce it. You made it.
What's that?
You guys should introduce it. You made it. Why don't you tell people what it is?
Well, this is just we've got a series of shots of just sort of showing the bridge that had to be the gap that had to be bridged between the interpretation of the comic book and then the final iteration in the film itself. Next.
Boom. This is, of course, the character Mystique, and this is I want these images side by side. It's important to see what Mystique looks like in the X-Men comic books and what she looks like in the realized film design, because, of course, one of the most important things is that one of the most important questions thinking about movies is how are you going to translate something from the page to the screen. So, Gordon?
In this particular case, it was difficult to translate from the comic book to reality, because a blue person with red hair, it didn't really translate successfully as anything that was abnormal. There's a lady here with blue hair, I noticed earlier today. It's not an abnormal thing. I know that eventually skin tinting will be very popular as soon as it becomes safe, and or food coloring and things like that become an accepted norm. We accent our bodies by doing things like shoving ball bearings in our heads and tattooing ourselves and stuff like that. But that particular trying to make that translation, it really just didn't work in the film. So it really boiled down to, at the end of the day, was a director slamming his fist on the table, screaming, "I want her nude. I want her nude. I want her nude." And that was about it. So the design challenge started from there. I had built costume. I had designed costume logics for that particular character because the producer said she has to be in a costume, where we cannot get away with a nude woman on set or on film or get a PG rating, and I totally understood that, and part of my job was to make sure that they did get a PG rating. But when I presented the costume interpretations, which were kind of half nude, and here's some little bit of clothes here and there, the response was a clearing of the table by the director's arm as he cleared everything off the table and reiterated, "I want her nude, I want her nude, I want her nude."
All right. Here, it's a similar shot of Nightcrawler as he appears in the comics. We've already been talking today about some swashbuckling influences on superhero comic books, and certainly this is something that Nightcrawler the character himself, actively embraces as a sort of persona against the finished product for the film.
And in this case, it was kind of the same, because it was early in the world of bringing comic book characters to film. We were kind of breaking new ground. even for me, it wasn't new ground as an actor, as somebody who comes out of the theater. As was stated before, if there's not an element of believability, there's not an element of believability, and that's the end of it. You know, we as humans recognize life, we recognize believability, oh, that's possible. We believe grotesqueness. Humans come in many, many different forms, far beyond the extrapolations of comic book characters. We find them very weird, but in reality, in real life, we have real people that are much more off the wall than them, aside from color issues. The color issues I've always viewed as, I guess it was easier to use blues and reds and things like that in the printing process, so that's the color they got to be. More difficult than doing skin tones.
All right, you guys want to tell people about this Iron Man concept design?
This was my first kind of take on it. First serious take on it. And when Jon Favreau asked me to do a poster for the San Diego convention, Comic-Con, they didn't want any existing design to be on the poster, and they wanted it to be very obscured, so you couldn't really tell, because at the time they didn't want to commit to a particular design. But still, in order to paint something, I had to design something. And then we started working, and then I did a few passes, and then the response from the producers was pretty much more guns. So they just wanted more gadgets, more things coming out. So basically this was kind of my take, where I could live with it, so it's not too much, not too far, but they would be happy with their stuff opening and happening, and they could make lots of different action figures from to you know. Because, I mean, from the very early stages, that was a big concern, that this was a character that can be exploited in many different media. And from the very start, even for this poster design, I had to show to them different possibilities in order for them to accept what John at the time was asking me to do.
Actually, it was pretty funny all the way through the process. At every design review meeting we had, you know, we'd have the stuff, and Avi Arad, who was the producer of the film, would sit down and he would look at our designs for, you know, the Mark I suit, or the Mark II suit, or the Mark III suit, or whatever it happened to be, and he would say, yes, this is very good, but where is my underwater suit?
That's right.
And we'd be, there's no underwater scene in the movie. And Avi Arad, of course, you know, his start in the business was owning a big toy company. So he'd say, yes, but where is my underwater suit? So in the end, I did actually design an underwater suit. But it didn't make it into this movie.
But the first thing that, the comic book version that I was doing, I inherited that triangular design. And at the time, I didn't know that because I've never read an Iron Man comic book before I started working on it. So I thought that was something I had to stick with. And then by the time I was working on it, I realized that was just something that the artist previous to me did, and I thought it always looked too much like a Superman symbol. So when the movie came around, I told John we need to change it to the circle. And they wouldn't go for it, because in the comic they saw the triangular, and then when I told them, but it looks just like Superman, suddenly overnight it was like, okay, it's the circle, you know. So I'm very happy with that.
I think that also relates to going back to, I think, what Peter said at the beginning of the show about authenticity, going back to earlier designs. He was talking about the you know, the baseball costumes and that sort of thing. And I think that also gives it a certain gravitas or whatever, that it's going right back to the original design. And also in the film, a lot of attention was placed to the meaning behind that circular symbol on the chest.